Greetings and bienvenue, MITZU. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
So I had an alien experience that happened over 3 days a couple months back. I have no photographic evidence. There was 3 people including myself, but only I and my other friend could see them. The other friend is the one who told me about them before she moved in with us, and I did in fact experience what she told me would happen. We even made music together, and they gave me the notes to play. A lot of things happened over these 3 days. Before I even begin to write out what happened, because it's a long story, is it best to keep my mouth shut? Is it even worth typing out? Could I be in actual danger if I tell these things to the public? To the anon who is reading this, if you feel like I'm baiting you, then don't waste your time. Just ignore the thread, because I promise I'm not here to mislead anyone. What I want to do is discuss my experiences to see if anyone else has had similar experiences, but I don't want it to be futile. Since I have no evidence, is the only option I have to write it out and hope people believe me? What do? I don't want to have an endless amount of replies calling me schizo, and I've spent months thinking if I want to discuss it or keep it secret for my entire life. But I feel I am doing a disservice to humanity by keeping it locked away. But without evidence, what's the point? Why didn't I get pictures? I was told that if you try to take pictures of them, they would leave and not come back, and their behavior in general was unthreatening, so I didn't want to scare them away. Picture very much unrelated did not look like this.
How many drugs were you on?
A good bit for the first 2 nights, but I shit you not, I was completely sober on the 3rd night when we made the music together. It's easy to say schizo, or even drug-induced schizo, but you need to read the whole story first. Should I post it?
Play the song and upload it.
Okay, let me make a MIDI of that real quick, and in the meantime I'm going to post my story. Backstory. I'm a musician of 20+ years and was not a believer in extraterrestrials. I have a hobby of studying physics. Wife and I have a longtime friend. We all went to high school together, who fell on hard times, moved in with us when she and her ex didn't work out. She moved in, told us what her life had been like in the year or so since we've seen her. She mentioned she had several alien experiences. The first was when she saw a fleet of ships at the beach with about 400 or so other people, all who witnessed it. We think nothing of it since she's done a lot of drugs. Even with her photos, it was WUA, gotta be an explanation. Didn't spend too much time thinking about it. She tells us about an alien she befriended, then she named Hue, as in hue of light. She tells us that she saw the faces of her loved ones in the constellations of the sky. She claims to have had a continuous relationship with this Hue in particular, and she can feel when he comes around. She claims this is from the same fleet that forms the triangular light patterns that are captured a lot on phones these days. Similar to what Commander Fravor talks about and what he recorded, think nothing of it and move on with life. Few months later, after she moves in, she randomly walks outside and says, "Huey is here." Huey is a lantern-like orange light across the neighborhood where there is normally no light. She says he always keeps his distance but is curious, and he's always observable when he wants to be seen by the aforementioned light. I think it's strange but still think nothing of it. A week goes by. We have a party and do some drugs. All 3 of us stayed up for 5 days straight. Nothing paranormal happened for the first 2 days. On day 3, I go to take a shower, and I start seeing strange bug-like things everywhere, all flying to my face. I've done a lot of mind-altering drugs in life, so I just tell myself it's hallucinations and think nothing of it, aware of what kind of effects drugs has on the psyche, especially combined with sleep deprivation. Smoke starts gathering from nowhere and consistently surrounds my face. Even when I try to push it away, it keeps coming to my face. The smoke reveals a picture of what looked like an alien computer system with a map of GPS coordinates, with every person on the planet marked and plotted in real time, and then reveals a language out of dots, like Morse code, with markings I don't understand. I just assume I've gone full schizo and proceed to get a shower anyways. Walk back into the living room, tell my wife and friend, didn't know this drug could make you see shit like this. Friend who claims to have experience with aliens says, you can see it too. She lifts up her pants to show me her sock. covered with thousands of amobea-like bugs. Says she sees it too. Walks over to my bookshelf to pick up a feather I have for decoration. Says the plants and the bugs are attracted to natural things. Vines start emerging out of the IRL non-drug-induced plants I have for decoration in my home. The more you focus on them, the more they disappear, just like the bugs from earlier. I know none of this makes zero sense because even on drugs that cause hallucinations, the chance for two people to see the same things consistently over the next 24 hours is essentially impossible. My wife can't see any of this at all. She starts thinking we're schizo. Try to retain my sanity, continue to think little of it. Other plants in the house have a blue hue, but only with one eye open. The left eye couldn't see the blue. The same smoke that contained the computer earlier was congregating toward my ceiling. Blah, blah, more general hallucinations throughout day 3. Day 4, alien boogaloo. Friend says she feels that Hugh is here again. We go outside to look. It's nighttime. There are 10 or so lantern lights scattered across the neighborhood. Know that after my previous experience, some weird shit is happening. Sit outside with her on a mat and spend about 3 hours looking at them and talking amongst ourselves. Get the idea to flash my lighter at them to see if we can communicate. I flash to them and they flash back. One is in a tree, one is behind us, several are on the other side of the park, etc. Small camp-like buildings are erected near some of the lights, and it's a goddamn light show. Purples, blues, reds, greens, all flashing around, moving across the ground through the sky. Could not believe it. Think I'm 200% schizo at this point, but we're both seeing it. My wife is still inside and is getting very angry, both from being left out and thinking our friend and I have gone completely crazy. I go inside to try to get her to come outside and sit with us, but she's too upset. We all end up sort of fighting with each other. The vibe is kind of ruined, so we just retire inside and keep on with the night. The next night, aliens came back, similar to what happened the day before. Except this time, I see large machinery fit between my neighbors' houses. I look up to the sky and I see a large crescent-shaped spaceship with a gravitational vortex around it, bending all light inside the vortex. The crescent-shaped ship bends its wings to create any shape of the moon. That night's moon was a perfect half moon. The ship took the shape of the moon and put a veil over the ship to become the moon. Finally, after 5 days of no sleep and no eating, I crash and sleep it all off, sobering up the next day. No drugs, perfectly rested beyond this point. Spend the entire next day reflecting on my experiences, thinking it was most likely the drugs, but how could we have both seen it? The vines, the bugs, the aliens. Am I crazy? Friend says she wants to write a song for Hugh. Tell her that's weird because I was thinking a lot about how to communicate with them, and music can be interpreted in all forms, like Voyager 1 Golden Record. We decide to write them a song to suggest peace. Tell her I suggest circle of fifths because aliens don't have the same way of thinking about major and minor scales that humans do. Friend tells me I don't need drugs to see them, just willingness. We do a group meditation on the back porch. I was instructed to try to focus your thoughts like a beam into space to guide them to where the thoughts come from. Wait until night, friend says. She felt Hugh again. Go out front. See a bunch of lights again. Blues and reds and such, all swooping across the ground and through the trees. I signal them with my lighter again, thinking I may be able to establish a form of communication with math. Binary signaling, 0 for no, 1 for yes. Other modes including tempo and rhythm, that is things that could be understood by advanced entities that obviously don't speak English. They flash a giant red light and partially show themselves, but it lasted less than half a second, friend, and I almost shit ourselves in fear but are giddy with excitement. Remember, we want to write a song for them, so we start talking to them and ask them. Lights are going crazy everywhere, actually starting to hurt my head. Friend says she hears what sounds like whistling about 10 acres away, and random lights are goading us to stand in a certain spot. Tell her I can't hear it, but I listen close and I could. No, because I've tuned guitars forever. What a 440 hertz sounds like. It was a perfect A440 hertz. Matched the whistle with my whistle. Whistled more tunes and they whistled it back. Communication established. Spend the next 2 hours whistling a few notes at a time, running back inside to play them on the piano and map out the notes. Hear a large horn in the distance. It's another perfect A. Hear another large horn in the opposite direction. It's a perfect E. A's fifth. They're confirming the circle of fifths idea. Red light starts blinking above the clouds. Match it with my lighter. Plug in the BPM to find the tempo. Friend has a migraine from too many lights. Goes inside. I spend the remainder of the night outside with my guitar, plucking out the notes they keep whistling at me as small riffs, slowly over 5 hours assembling the song. And that's my experience. I haven't seen them since. I can plug the music into a MIDI if you guys give me just a bit. It's really pretty music. I know how it all sounds. Drugs, no sleep, no food. It's pretty obvious how it comes off. But again, I just want to know if anyone else out there has experienced what I did. Last but not least, the song. Very interesting to me, they did the whole thing in a major. And that small riff that plays the EBDC is pretty. I'm happy they showed it to me. I forgot to mention the street and house lights. There were gravity fields around the street and porch lights that were forcing the lights to go perfectly downward and not omnidirectional, as if the light was interfering with what they were doing. And it was even stranger because it wasn't every street and house light, just some of them.
You need to spend some serious time with your wife or your marriage is fucked, bro. Also, you and friend are both schizotypal and highly suggestible.
Yeah, we're actually perfectly happy and we're 100% sober these days, so maybe you should spend 1. More time discussing the topic at hand. 2. Not LARPing as a marriage counselor on the paranormal board on 4chan. 3. Thinking you're wise enough to tell how two people are and their given relationship by an alien story on 4chan. This is why I started the OP the way I did. Don't poison my thread.
Meth head thinks we're gonna believe a meth head hallucination after being up for 5 days straight.
It's a fair point, but I made this thread on other boards too, and the overwhelming amount of responses always say the same thing. If it's hallucinations, you need to explain how more than one person can see the same thing both on and off the same drug over a period of time. No one has been able to do that yet. They just stop replying.
Never sensed any in this realm with the basic external senses. This is not to say that presence hasn't been detected, but not visual or communication of any sort. Only once, interdimensionally. A sudden urge to relax and close eyes late at night, whilst in a chair. The event was an OBE of sorts. Something was given in a non-tangible form, which seemed like very intense vertigo. The being was a female with dark green skin who was humanoid in appearance, except for a larger head above the temples. Also, her mouth did not move when speaking, but she was moving slightly, while likely in a seated position. Alas, only the top of her head down to her clavicle could be seen, so that is all the visual of her. Her demeanor was not pleasant nor off-putting. The only other information given was that she said she was from the Andromeda Council. The choice was given to accept or decline, but acceptance would lead to physical change of the body. Acceptance was delivered, and following the acceptance came the vertigo until blackout. Please describe some physical details. Pick is not of sufficient accuracy but gives an idea. Also, her eyes were not black. They were humanoid.
So tell me straight up, my anonymous fam. It's a fool's game to ever utter these things in public, isn't it? I should probably keep these things secret for the rest of my life, yes? And before any mentioning of meds, I'm already pursuing psychiatric help, so let's just keep this contained to discussing the topic at hand without mentions of psychology, already on it.
Fellow experiencer here? Yes. Really, your only bet is online experiencer communities. Mentioning this shit to anyone in public will just damage your rep in the long run, unless it's a very close and open-minded family member you absolutely trust.
OP here, fun fact. I was around /X/ back when the alien picture shut down the site and all the crazy shit that followed it happened. Insane times. The alien that flashed the red light from the story earlier did not look like the alien picture that shut down 4chan. The alien pic definitely happened, but if it was somehow the same species, I'm probably the only person on the site who could tell you it was most likely not the same type of creature. I know most of you won't believe me, but goddamn, I hope someone here can relate. And if anyone is wondering why I came here to talk about this is the only place on the planet, including the internet, I feel both safe enough to talk about it, and the site may be the only option I'll ever have to meet someone else who could experience it. If I experienced this with a friend of mine, and she experienced it with many other people before me, then there has to be someone else out there. If it was just me, I'm crazy, but we have a law of 2 and more here.
The song sounds really familiar somehow. It reminds me of an intro to a hymn they'd play on a church organ. Or maybe an outro theme in an animated movie.
Couldn't tell you, man. Grew up Protestant and became Catholic later. Not Cath anymore. And it wasn't quite like anything I heard in those places. But musically, I see how you draw that line. It is very hymn-like, but I think this is probably just because of how the West adopted early Greek province music. I'm sure you know, but notes are just changes in pressure, so it makes sense that a spacefaring civilization would understand them mathematically, even if they don't hear it the same way. Like us and birds can also hear sounds but hear it differently, all sounds in the same medium nonetheless.
Who told you that if you try to take pictures of them, they would leave and not come back?
My friend did. She said she took pictures of Hugh and he didn't come back for a few months. She took it as an insult. Now understand this. I most certainly thought about photographic evidence while all of this was going on. So here was my line of reasoning as to why I didn't. 1. It wasn't worth showing the lads online when they're just average-looking lights to begin with, and you can Photoshop anything. 2. They were indeed average-looking lights from a distance, and it was strange because every light was geometrically proportional to an actual light behind it. But it wasn't an illusion because of the aforementioned camp-like bunkers. Some were spinning, and other waves of lights were covering the sky and the ground. Not only this, but as I mentioned before, I signaled to one and it signaled back. This happened several times. 3. If what my friend says was true, and I was witnessing a civilization far more advanced than ours, I tried to act as a sort of diplomat and treat them with absolute respect in hopes that they may see that we're a species that's worth interacting with, and maybe they could help us. As my friend and I sat on the mat outside, I purposely discussed with her how much needless suffering this planet has, in hopes that they were curious enough about us to hear my plea. Insulting them, as I was warned, was something I wanted to risk, but I feared the end result was too much. It just wasn't worth getting pictures of abstract lights to risk the potential benefit of making friends with something smarter than us, in nothing but earnest honesty and truth and compassion. I should also mention regarding this post that I forgot to post in the story, but I later posted it anyways. There were gravitational spheres around certain lights in the neighborhood. Most street lights and porch lights had a sphere around them, and the light from them was being pulled down, as if the light was interference with whatever they are. Considering lights was a big factor here, especially the visible spectrum of light. I never gathered a physical form with the exception of the red light flash, where I barely made out a being that was roughly 5 feet tall or so, slightly humanoid, could barely count the limbs. I figured that a camera, considering the exposure triangle works on light principles, would indeed be insulting to a light and gravity spacefaring creature, so the mechanics of light itself was a major factor here. To add to this post, I contemplated a lot on these principles when I witnessed the spaceship. There was a gravitational field around the crescent-shaped ship that seemed to bend all light around the ship, similar to the bending of light on the porch and streetlights. As I mentioned before, I study physics for fun, so as I pondered on the idea of a ship being able to travel large distances approaching the speed of light, they want to make sure it doesn't run into any random celestial body. If you travel across galaxies, the chance of your trajectory hitting something gets bigger the more you travel. Them being able to manipulate light with gravity would help us understand the imperfections of general and special relativity, because even though gravity is the weakest force, it's the only one that can bend the constant absolute light. This is the basis of Schwarzschild black holes, and it's extremely similar to what I saw with their craft. The crescent shape was foldable, so it could form to any shape of the visible moon, and a veil formed over it. Makes you think about those moon experiments where it rang like a bell. The gravitational field mentioned here is important, because if you travel across large distances throughout the universe, the chance of hitting something raises the further you go. If you aim to travel all of it, this chance approaches infinity. In order to guarantee that a ship that approaches the speed of light not only maintains its trajectory, but also guarantees that it doesn't hit anything, the ideal system would be gravity that could work like magnets, push and pull. This is the exact tech that Bob Lazar claimed to study, the gravitational propulsion of a particular ship, and after witnessing it, it makes perfect sense. If you could manipulate gravity to the point where you are attracted to your destination but repelled from all other impeding objects but also use them to maintain your course, you could go anywhere at any speed approaching infinity beyond the fourth dimension at any moment without hitting anything. Plus, it would require no fuel.
Musician of 20+ years, encounters alien intelligence, writes the blandest, most dog-shit melody of all time. I would jump off a bridge if I even improvised something so shit when I was alone in my bedroom on copious amounts of drugs.
It was whistled across the forest, and they're not my notes. I didn't write that song. Why me? Probably because I'm the only guy around who would not only be able to transpose those notes on the spot in the early morning of the night, and the willingness to do it. Didn't write the song, mate. Take it for what you will.
You're making up a bullshit story which I want to enjoy so badly, but as an actual musician, I can't. To think that an alien intelligence would whistle something so similar to what a mediocre human would come up with is impossible for me.
Maybe it evolves over time. Maybe it was just because I meditated on the idea of circle of fifths and they were confirming it. I'm a real musician, mate, and I'm sure you are too, but this isn't my song. The whistling was hard to decipher. It was faint and quiet, and it took me several tries to find the right notes as I was transposing them on my front porch, trying not to look crazy to all my neighbors who thought the dude with the guitar out at 2 a.m. lost his marbles. It was difficult, but it's what I got. The BPM is just the BPM. The song you heard was rolled on the piano roll accordingly, but that version isn't how the song goes. It's just the notes. Maybe the melody was supposed to carry differently, but I was unable to interpret that when I could only hear it piece by piece. It was more of a way of communicating with physics than it was writing Chopin.
Fair enough. I'll send you a couple different articulations of it then. I'm curious to hear something that more closely resembles it.
Sure, it was most certainly all in A major, and there is a chance it could be tuned below 440, potentially 432, but I don't buy into that 432 stuff, so feel free to adjust the frequency and it may alter the results. For further input, the first two parts, the AEA, EAE in the beginning, that was played on the horn. Everything beyond that was whistled. I suspect the horn set the tuning and the rest was composition. Who knows? I never mentioned why we whistled to begin with. It was my idea first. Once I understood on the third night they were certainly light-based in some way. They understand wave physics. I whistled at them first after they confirmed they were there and they whistled back. I whistled as close to a perfect 440 Hz A that I could, knowing if they were so capable, they would know what that is, and they whistled back. So if you're wondering why whistling was even a thing, that's just how I tried to communicate with them and they did it back.
Lay off the LSD LOL. But you should really finalize and post that music you made. I want to hear some alien notes.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.